Hello and welcome. In this video, I'll show you how I built this intersection. This is the median U-turn intersection, sometimes called the through turn or Michigan left, or in Australia, P-turn intersection. It's a very interesting type of an intersection. It bans left turns. If you want to turn left, you need to first go through the intersection forward and then do a U-turn. So you continue in the opposite direction from which you make a turn right. It can handle some increased volumes of traffic, and in real life, it's supposed to be a safer alternative to a normal intersection. This build right here is the first where I started some detailing. I wanted to make it realistic. I used real-life standards for road markings. Well, not right away, but more on that later. Then I wanted to use some decals, props, nicer decorations around it, trees, and so on, while obviously keeping it functional. This is probably a start of a really small sub-series, because together with this intersection I built the surrounding area as well, that I'm going to feature in future episodes. Anyway, let's go to the start. So as you can see, I started completely from scratch on a completely open ground. I had to flatten it before, but I kind of made a mistake. I didn't flatten the entire area where the intersection is, so that's actually going to be a bit of a problem later, because I'm not going to have a flat ground for props, ploppable asphalt, and stuff like that. Anyway, I started by placing two roads like this. I wanted to make them parallel together, but at some slightly decreased spacing than the game would allow me to build from, for example, the grid. So I had to use Move It like that, and then I used Move It to just copy paste the other road and kind of eyeball it to 90 degrees. In here I'm starting to make the U-turn areas. I'm using the network extension small roads, or the tiny roads, not sure how it's called, and obviously making it on for all four sides of the intersection. The intersection is going to be symmetrical, but later in the build I'm going to show you that I'm actually not going to treat both of these intersecting roads equally, and gonna make one kind of look more important. In here I'm using the network extension roads again to make the right turns, to kind of make them more smoother. And I also need to connect the intersection to the outside world like this temporarily, because I do need traffic to evaluate how the intersection is going to work. In here I'm making those U-turn areas. I decided to make use of Move It like that and make a kind of highly distorted piece of road. I really wanted to, at this point I really wanted to just use ploppable asphalt, so I didn't mind that the road underneath is going to be distorted like that. Using these different types of roads in the intersection, I used all kinds of roads at the start. I used the 4-lane, 3-lane, 2-lane roads from the network extension, the vanilla roads, and even the tiny roads as well. But later I'm going to change that. In here I'm making some road connections, making all the lanes go where they need to go, so the traffic actually follows the functionality of the intersection, how it's going to be at the end. Now I can already spoil at this point, I think, that I'm going to be making a lot of changes. So when I'm going to be starting doing some detailing in this video, I'll kind of try to skip through it a bit faster, because it's all going to change. Well, not all, but some things. In here I'm trying to make that loop just right, so the traffic really looks good. And I think in here I probably succeeded with that, so I'm going to leave it. And I just did it on all other connections. In here I'm making just a simple timed traffic lights, nothing special. I'm just treating these 4 nodes as one intersection basically. Doing some other changes with Traffic Manager as well. And in here I finally started doing some of the detailing. So first up, we need to cover this distortion of the loop in here. As you can see, using ploppable asphalt, nothing all that special I suppose, but it's going to make that area look really nice, really nice. It's already starting to look really good. This was my, like I said in the beginning, this was my first intersection where I did some detailing, and this area in particular is where it all started, so I was quite excited to it. Now in here I started doing those road markings, and like I said, I am going to change some of these things, but I decided to just show you how exactly I started and what the improvement was after I decided that I'm no longer going to keep the first thing that I built. Anyway, in here building the kind of the area where cars don't go, making those areas where you have those stripes. I'm trying to use the prop line tool using just pretty much random lines at this point. I was not really concerned with line thickness too much because, like I said, I was not following any standards at this point. But it's looking really good. I remember that when I was doing this on the live stream, I was quite excited that it's starting to look really good. Now in here, using ploppable asphalt to cover all the vanilla crosswalks because there's quite a few. And this intersection is kind of going to be, well, not in the middle of nowhere, but it's definitely not an urban intersection. So it's not going to have crosswalks everywhere. Now in here I started doing those dividing lines between various traffic lanes. And this is actually something that is quite important. As you can see, the lanes going through the middle of the intersection are not really completely straight. That's something that I didn't mind at first, but later in the video I am going to change these road markings together with the road types. This is something interesting because I used, at the start of the intersection for each direction, I used a 3-lane road, which means it's an odd number of lanes. But at the rest of the intersection, I'm using an even number of lanes, like 4 or 2. Which means that some of the lines or some of the lanes are not exactly straight, are not exactly connected straight. And like I said, at this point I didn't really mind, so I was just going with it. So painting all these types of intersections, markings, stuff like that. At this point, at this U-turn over here, I decided to make a intersection towards some kind of a like a warehouse area. I decided I want to make some kind of a really small, like a logistics warehouse area with like a gate or something like that, because I've seen a real life U-turn intersection and it actually had like a small kind of an exit, not really 100% intersection at one of the U-turn points. So I decided I want to do that as well in here. So this is the U-turn I was talking about. Again, detailing it. It was because of that other road going from it. It was distorted a bit more than the normal U-turns that I had. And these road markings, I didn't really want to bother with them too much, so I just copy-pasted. And this is how the logistic warehouse started to look like. Really small, just a little small parking lot, some like an entrance gate. In here I started doing some almost final shape of the connection to the outside world, to this type of the road, to the broader avenue. And you can already see that because I'm using the ambient occlusion graphics mod. It's creating some kind of weird shadows where the ploppable asphalt is. That's because of the terrain is not exactly flat. Like I said in the beginning, it's going to be a bit of a problem. I decided that I don't want to have the concrete underneath the intersection because, like I said, it's not exactly an urban intersection. It's not really going to be looking good with the concrete everywhere. In here I tried to cover the edges of the road using the ploppable grass because I really wanted to make a smooth transition to that 4-lane avenue road and making some road barriers and trying to look nice. Now this point I'm making another intersection on the other side of that U-turn intersection, but this one is actually going to be really interesting and I'm going to feature it in a next video or the one after the next video, not exactly sure yet. So I'm just going to do a little bits, little pieces of the build for that intersection, but we are going to see this one in some later videos. Anyway, it looked something like this after it was done. And this intersection, that road going from that little intersection is actually going to go into an area that I'm also going to feature in some next videos. Anyway, back to the U-turn intersection. Again, I'm just using copy-paste to copy these lines pretty much to the rest of the intersection. and then putting down some of these traffic arrows in one side of the intersection or one place of the intersection, and again copy pasting it to the rest of the area. Nothing all that special. In here, because of that residential area, I'm putting down some of the soundproof barriers and also building a crosswalks to this place. This particular one I had to build on the side of that right turn road, but in real life that's not exactly how it's done. Usually these crosswalks are in the middle of that right turn road. I actually changed it to that later, but not at this point. At this point I wanted to have it so that people in the game actually going to use that crosswalk, going to cross that decal, that particular decal. Filling the area with the pavement path on the other side of the intersection, like this. And this is how the intersection looked like, but the road markings were not just right. So I decided to find a real-life standards for these and follow them to make it more realistic and change some road types as well. And that is what I did first. Like I said before, I had even an odd number of lanes on each different segments of the intersection. So I wanted to kind of make it more compatible by just using only even number of lanes, so 2 and 4. In here I'm trying to make a very nice transition to like the normal highway and to the highway that's going to the intersection, the two directional or two one directional roads, and putting some like final road markings in here. Also I wanted to change these stripes at the U-turn areas like that. And actually at this point I was not really following the correct thicknesses of the lines, how they need to be in real life. So that's actually going to change a bit later as well. Now, in the meantime, I was changing all these road types to the 4-lane variants, and I also decided that I am going to use 4-lane roads even in places where I only need 3 lanes, because I'm going to just cover one of those lanes with some props and decals. In here, I discovered that cars were actually going over the curb of that right turns. So I made the curb slightly wider, basically, by just putting down like a prop curb and covering it with some ploppable asphalt and grass. Putting down some lines in the center of the intersection, and as you can see, it's already straight, going straight through the intersection. It's going to be much nicer looking after it's done. Now in here, I tried to create these little stripes near the concrete island, but I decided that I can't really do it because I don't really have lines that short. So I just use those parking lot markings, I think, from the workshop. It's not exactly realistic because those don't have the correct thicknesses, but it's fine. It's fine. I decided that I'm just going to use what I have by keeping it semi-realistic and also nice looking in the game, or at least somewhat realistic and nice looking in the game. Anyway, these shapes of the markings of these stripes near the island and the median are obviously going to be the same on all other corners of the intersection. And at this exact point, this is probably the start of another stream when I started doing those markings like properly spot on how it needs to be in real life. So I downloaded some more markings, and these markings that are dividing, or these lines that are dividing the straight direction from, for example, the turning lane, merging lane, or the U-turn, they need to be made from very short lines with like slightly decreased spacing compared to the lines that are dividing the two lines going straight. Also, I wanted to change this like a stripe area. I wanted to make it more realistic, but again, I didn't really have the correct lines, the correct tools to do it, so I just put a curb in the middle of it. And again, I'm just copy pasting all these lines pretty much. In here, I wanted to exactly cover the original markings on the road, but I wasn't really able to do that, so I had to use ploppable asphalt pretty much on all the roads. basically. Now also, notice that we have this like a ruined earth, like an orange looking texture next to the road. It's not going to look good, especially in contrast with the ploppable grass. It's going to make like a sharp transition between like this orange color and the green color. That's going to be important later. In here, I was already putting down a curb to kind of cover one lane of that 4-lane road. And I'm just putting down some of these thick lines to mark like the outer sides of the roads. And again, just copy pasting what I created on one side to all the other sides of the intersection. Putting down some of these road markings, like give way signs as well. And just doing some tiny details like these like stop marks, these straight 30-meter lines right next, right before the stop mark. And like I said, just copy pasting things and doing some tiny little changes. The first attempt that I showed you at the beginning of the video, kind of at that point I treated both of these intersecting roads equally, which means I created those markings inside the intersection like symmetrically. But in here I decided that I don't want to do that. I want to only have like one main road, and the other road is just going to be of like lesser importance, I suppose. So I'm going to do markings inside the intersection only for one direction, or for one road. It's going to look actually nicer because there's not going to be that many things inside the intersection. As you can see, not really doing anything all that special in here, just copy pasting everything and putting some different lines. And again, this is how the intersection looked like after another stream. Also, very important thing, I need to ban traffic from the lanes that I covered with the props and the ploppable gravel and asphalt. And again, just copy pasting everything to the rest of the intersection. And like I said, I'm only going to do markings for one road in that middle of the intersection like that. I had to also put down some of those street lights as well. I had to use the nighttime to make it a bit more obvious how I need to do it. And again, putting arrows, this time a bit more realistically, following the real life rules. So 3 or 5 arrows like that. And like I said, the texture thing, I decided that I want to change the texture for the ruined earth and make it more, pretty much make it the same looking as the grass, so that the transition is not that pronounced. And this, again, is how it looked like after the change. Much nicer. Now the grass actually looks really good around the intersection. And that was almost all for the build. I'm just putting down some of the decals, like the road wear, like making the areas that cars don't use a bit more dirty, a bit more dusty, and just making it more alive. These decals are really amazing. Ronix definitely did a nice job doing those because the intersections just look completely different, definitely more realistic. Some of the tire marks as well, especially near the U-turns, where cars would probably brake and accelerate a bit more, and putting down some trees next to the intersection as well, some of the taller grass and bushes like that. And because I'm lazy, I'm just copy pasting it to the other side of the intersection like that. So that was all for the build. Like I said, this was my first ever detailed intersection, properly detailed intersection. I really like it. I hope you also liked it, and I'll see you in the next video. Take care and goodbye.